Ayan na mga kameta! Kamusta kayo dyan? Nakahabol tayo guys. Kahit super traffic time and all. Sabi natin, let's make time sa mga kameta natin. Kamusta mga friends natin dyan? Mga kameta natin dyan. Metamites from Australia, New Zealand. Our Metamites from Europe, Quezon City, from California. People all around the world. Thank you very much guys dun sa mga sumabaybay sa atin. Yan. Kanina kasi meron tayong mga talk and events. Meron yung isang top jurist natin doon. Siyempre, Chatham House rules. So I'm not gonna quote people. I'm gonna respect the Chatham House rules. Kasama po din natin yung mga some of the leading journalists in the country. So we had very extensive discussion throughout the afternoon. Kaya yan, nakabalik naman tayo in time para naman dito sa ating 7 p.m. slot for our meta, guys. Ituloy natin yung discussion natin, guys. So, ito, by the way, ito yung book na I was referring to kahapon by Daniel Yergin. He actually has 3 fantastic books, including a recent book he just released on the changing geopolitics, of the oil and energy industry. Pag-usapan natin ng konti yan. Siyempre, may pangako sa inyo na we'll discuss more itong issue ng oil industry, mga others. So, don't worry. Now, kanina grabe guys, kanina feeling sikat talaga tayo. Kasama natin dyan, mga friends natin. Tapos kasama ko dyan si Bayaw, yung partner ni Lord De Vera. Tapos sabi ni Tito Bayaw, kamusta dyan? Uy, parang surprise ata sila sa mga comedy site natin. I think yung mga friends natin, iba, biglang yung mga iba na nakinig na sa ating meta, biglang I think na-surprise sila na meron tayong medyo Alaskador side na ganyan style, no? So, thank you naman dyan. So, hopefully, malamang, abangan nyo, di ba? Mamaya, baka meron kami mga podcast discussion with sila Bayaw, Lord De Vera, mga others, mga friends natin dyan sa creative industry, friends natin dyan sa PETA. Marami tayong mga kasama dyan, kainin from the Philippine theater sector, mga directors, writers, and mga others. That was fantastic. So, ito, picture with people, nakikipicture yung iba. Tapos, ito yung nangyari, guys. Bigla sabi ng isang kasama, uy, sir, gusto rin makipag-picture yung mga staff, ganon, yung mga security guard, ganon. Tapos ako, wow, sikat na pala ako. Wow, feel na ganon talaga pag vlogger. Gusto makipag-picture yung mga tao sa'yo talaga eh. Wow, let's go. So ito, pagpunta ako dyan sa door, sa entrance, andun sila ate, tapos nakikipicture sila, tapos naman picture, tapos lighting, yan. Tapos, kamusta, anong pangalan niyo dyan, ate? Ganon. Anong pangalan niyo dyan, ate? Ganon. So ito, feeling sikat na talaga. Wow, talagang lahat. Pwede nakikipag-picture sa akin. Ganun, wow, the best. Yun. Tapos biglang paalis na ako. Tanong ni ate, sir, ano palang pangalan nyo? Ayan tayo eh. Sabi ko, ba't nakikipicture sa akin? Di pala ako kilala. Not even as vlogger, not as professor, not as anything. Hindi pala tayo kilala. Pero nakikipicture sila sa akin. So parang isip ko, bakit kaya nakipag-picture sa akin? Dahil ba nakipag-picture iba sa akin? Or nakyutan sa akin? Nakamask naman ako. Or baka gusto nila aking Dolce Gabbana style. Yun talaga eh. Feel mo, wow, sikat ako talaga. Nakipag-picture lahat sa akin. Yan, ganon. Pati doon. Biglang, sir, ano palang pangalan nyo? Ayan tayo eh. Anong tawag dyan? Yung nakikipicture ang tao sa'yo, pero hindi nila alam sino ka. Or hindi nila alam yung pangalan mo. Kaya doon nag-isip ako, ba't sila nakipag-picture sa akin? Hindi mo pala, ayan tayo. Siguro naman sila ate. So baka kilalang nila yung mukha, pero hindi pangalan. Baka naman, nadala lang sa aking mga fuego, ito. Yun talaga eh. Interesting, malayo sila, ate, doon nakipag-picture. Kasi picture ako dito sa convention. Ayan, kasama mga tao, pati mga directors, mga ganun. Wow, sikat ako. Wow, I'm the man. Wow, I'm super sikat. Yeah, Zaddy, mga ganun. So, uy, sir, by the way, gusto makipag-picture sila, kuya, sila ate sa'yo doon. Wow, talagang pwede na to. Robin Padilla, who, right? Ayan na, pagpunta doon sa door, andun sila, kilig, let's go, picture, boom. Anong pangalan mo sa ate? Yeah, nice. Anong pangalan mo ate? Yeah, nice. Anong pangalan mo kuya? Nice. Ayan na, ito na tayo eh. Pwede ko na i-shoutout na sila ate. Paglabas, feel, talagang Armani feels so, Armani feels so. Diyan pa yung amoy ng Dolce Gabbana natin. Paglabas, ay, sir, ano pa ang pangalan nyo? And alam mo yung gano'n sa movie, yung nagsiscreech, what? Wait, what? Di mo alam ang pangalan ko, ba't nakipag-picture kayo sa akin? Ayan tayo eh. Hindi ko nga alam kung yun yung mas nakakatuwa or yung mga biglang ma-recognize ka sa mga dumadaan. Uy, yung vlogger, oh. Yan tayo eh. Uy, yung vlogger, oh. Di ko talaga, wala na. I don't know which one is more interesting. Pero guys, ganun talagang buhay ng mga sikat ngayon. Yung hindi nila alam pangalan mo. Pero nakikipag-picture sila sa'yo. Okay na yan. Hindi ko na sinabi, baka i-Darren, kompleto na yung Richard na lang, okay na yan. Sige po. Ayan tayo. Tuloy, di ko na ma-shoutout sila ate. Mahirap na. Ayan talaga eh. Meron din time. Alam mo, meron time. Sumabay ako hindi ko sabi sino yan, pero sumabay ako sa campaign ng isa sa mga politiko. Hindi, good person naman yan. Pumunta kami, hindi ko alam sa Ilocos ba yan, or hindi Marcos yan, hindi Sandro yan. Basta nakisama lang ako, parang nakika-observe, ganun. Pagpunta ko doon, wala, sa akin pumunta yung mga tao, hindi doon sa mga politiko. Akala nila ako yung, sabi ko, hindi ako, nakikisakay lang po ako. Hindi, pwede ka na, ikaw na lang kaya tumakbo po. Cute ka naman. Ibang klase, sabi ko eh. Ayan tayo eh. Ayan, tapos mas fresh pa ako nun. Di pa ako ganun kazadi eh. 20s ako nun eh. Doon lang ako sa tabi. Tapos naka-shades ako. Alam mo yung mga Vin Diesel style na shades, gano'n. Tapos naka-gano'n. Tapos lakad-lakad, medyo fit yung shirt, gano'n. Tapos naka-lakad-lakad. Sabi ko, siguro naman, pag nagkamali, siguro akala nila security ako, or mga gano'n-gano'n. Ayan, pagpasok ko dyan, no? Biglang, mga tao pupunta sa akin. Bakit sila pupunta sa akin? Wala naman ako pambigay, di ba? Ayan tayo. Talagang ganun, guys. Ganun ang buhay ngayon. So, yung sikat ka, pero hindi nila alam pangalan mo. So, eto na lang. Siguro pag tumakbo kang presidente or position, lagay mo yung mukha mo dun sa... Actually, it's a good idea, no? Avatar. Dun sa voting, lagay mo yung mukha mong avatar dun. Kahit hindi nila alam pangalan nila. Ay, ito yung vlogger. Botohin natin to. Ayan, senador. Gandang idea yan, guys. Doon sa balot, lagay mo yung avatar. So, yan. Magandang idea na. Lalo mga Gen Z na yung mga, pag matanda na yung mga Gen Z, baka hindi na alam pangalan nila. Ay, okay yan. Yung vlogger. Yung dating panon, nagsisimula yung vlogger yan. Classics yan, guys. Parang Beatles lang tingin sa'yo. Yan, guys. So, ganito po ang ating... ito yung ambag ko ngayon nowadays. Nakikipicture pero hindi nila alam yung pangalan mo. So, I don't know, man. I don't know should I take it as a compliment or ma-depress ako? I don't know. So, yun na lang. Naimbag ng gabi sa ating mga kapatid dyan. So, hindi ko alam kung sasama na ako sa mga campaign. Baka magalit pa. Bakit ikaw pinunta? Bakit? Ewan ko sa'yo. Bakit? Ikaw. Ayan tayo. Ayaw naman natin steal the show style, di ba? Mabait tayo. Wait lang. Nasaan na tayo? Nasira tuloy yung natin. Pero hindi ako makamove on doon eh. Ganda picture, sir. Wow, picture. Ang pangalan niyo man. Wow, picture. Wow. Flash, paparazzi, gano'n. Tapos biglang, sir, ano palang pangalan niyo? Ayan tayo. Ayan talaga tayo. Gano'n. Pero parang mas gusto ko yan kaysa, uy, yung vlogger, ganun talagang tao, hindi man lang siya, wala, talagang wala. Ganun talagang kalagayan natin, guys. Ayan, maglagay ka ng ID, ako? Comelec official, yung meron ID ka na naglalakad. Wag na, baka mareklamo pa tayo. Ay, nako. Basta, daming kuda. Basta hindi ako nagkaren, mabait ako, Ay, Richard po. Anong full name? Basta Richard, tapos umalis na ako, depressed na ako. Parang, hindi ko ma-absorb yung nangyari. Like, matuwa ba ko or hindi? Like, yan. So, kaya solution natin dyan, guys, pag tumakbo tayo, lagyan natin yung mukha natin dyan. Ay, yun yung vlogger, yan, gusto ko yan. Lagyan na, bobotoy niya yan. Maganda yan. Ganun. Deserve tayo, guys. Deserve. So, bukas siguro, I'll discuss more yung mga pinag-usapan namin dun sa conference namin kanina about disinformation, about media, blogger, etc. Even some of the legalistic analysis on that. Balikan ko kayo dyan. But today, guys, At nangako tayo pag ano natin na dyan tapusin na natin dyan itong issue ng economics. Alright, so I'm gonna give you a very, I would say, concise overview of the big debates in economics, no? I don't know if I have dapat andito yung copy ng isang book. So, in a way, we have gone through, so, alam nyo naman ang kapitalismo, di ba? Ang sistema po ng ekonomiya natin ay kapitalismo. Ibig sabihin, the people of the ultimate power are the capitalists. That's a more leftist way of looking at it. The right-wing way of looking at it is a capitalism is a system whereby markets determine prices and availability of goods, etc. So the market dominates. So the predominance of market economics, that's capitalism. A more Marxist way of looking at it, baka matarektak tayo, is the complete transformation in the modes of production. So in Marxist economics, modes of production is composed of two elements: relations of productions and means of production. So relations of production means so ganito what changed with capitalism since the introduction of Industrial Revolution in UK? Ayan, biglang seryoso na tayo from vlogger mode. Ito na tayo. Lecture na tayo, guys. Trans-historical. So, since introduction of Industrial Revolution, ito yung talagang nag-iba sa mundo. No? One of these things is that the relationship between labor and capital changed, right? So, back in the day, the relationship was different. Parang kunyari, serf ka, tapos amo mo. So, he owns you and your life and all of that, right? And then there was complete slavery, right? And then there were all more egalitarian versions of political economy, very well discussed in books, one of the top books of recent years, Beginning of Everything. We can also discuss about that. But what changed with capitalism is that essentially tayo na walang kapital, hindi tayo kapitalista mayayaman. Ang binibenta po natin yung ating labor, right? So we sell our labor. In exchange for labor, they give us a wage. Now, the difference between our labor and wage is the profit that goes to the capitalist, right? So whatever ang sweldo mo, sigurado that's just a portion of the productivity, labor productivity that you have. So that's the labor theory of value, etc. So this is the more Marxist way of looking at it. So that's relations to production, whereby the capitalists always have a say over the labor sector. Right now, I'll give you an example. How does this work? Why are they so powerful? So imagine it's like this. So di ba, may recruiter, kunyari, mayroon kaming construction work, di ba? Ganito style. Pupunta yung recruiter dyan, naka-truck, pupunta dyan sa City Hall, no? Tapos nakatambay lahat yung mga gusto maghanap ng trabaho, di ba? Ganito tapos sabihin ng recruiter, kailangan ko lang ngayon, 5 workers dun sa construction site namin, di ba? Tapos may instruction yung may-ari ng construction or contractor dun sa, kuha ka ng ganun, pero try mo kunan ng best price. Now, sabihin natin, 6 na tao ang nakatenga dun sa City Hall, 5 lang jobs na available. So, how is this gonna happen, right? Obviously, we'll discuss later on minimum wage, kaya kailangan ng minimum wage. So, this is what's gonna happen. There's 6 people there, but only 5 jobs are available, right? Ikaw may pera, ikaw may project. So, ang mangyari dyan, what do you think will happen with the 6? Now, among the 6, one of them is not gonna get the job, right? Only 5 will get. So, what's gonna happen here is bidding war. Bidding to the bottom. So, yung isa na feeling niya, siguro hindi siya makukuha dahil mas maliit siya or whatever, or mas matanda siya, whatever, mag-offer siya ng pinakamababang presyo. Sir, kahit 50 pesos lang buong araw, basta may bigay ka sa akin, pupunta ako dyan. So, yung ibang 5, para naman walang maiwan sa akin, they're also willing to give their wage, they're willing to offer the labor even cheaper, no? So, that's why in a capitalist system, without any kind of regulation or minimum wage, ang mangyayari dito is kawawa yung mga trabahador. Dahil yung mga trabahador ay mag-away-away dun sa mga limited slots na kailangan ng mga kapitalista or mga contractors, etc. Right? Now, again, I'm very much simplifying it. Simplifying the asymmetry in relations of production sa ilalim ng kapitalismo. But the second one, and that's what you guys are more familiar with, is the change or transformation in the means of production. Yung adoption of new technologies that allow us to produce almost any products, right? Like, grabe, tapos ngayon may 3D printing pa. You can produce, probably you can 3D print a house now, right? You can 3D print even a house. So the technology allowed for en masse production unlike any time before. But one of the things that people forget is that the relations of production have only changed. Now, wala tayong time to go into the enclosure movement and the emergence of the bourgeoisie and emergence of proletariat class. So I'm just giving you guys a very simplified understanding of a much more progressive analysis of capitalism, right? So capitalism essentially is the historical transformation in the modes of production. Production of what? Production of product, production of economic value. And under that, two things change: relations of production and means of production. I'm sure all of us were familiar with the means of production, which is yung technology na bago na ginagamit. But what we forget is also the relations in production. Because in a traditional society, guys, pre-capitalist society, kumbaga, nagtatrabaho ka sa bukid at hindi sa'yo siguro yung bukid, may amo ka. Pero yung amo mo, meron siyang social obligation sa'yo. Kasama kayo sa isang baryo, kasama kayo sa isang komunidad. So in sociology, there's the term Gesellschaft and Gemeinschaft, right? Small village to big society. Now, in a capitalist system, all of those bonds are out of the window. The capitalist only has one obligation to you: just pay you the wage that you agreed upon. And then after that, bahala ka sa buhay mo, right? Kung wala kang benefits, healthcare, bahala ka. You're on your own. I have no social obligation to you. Pera-pera lang yan, walang personalan, right? So the relations of production has completely transformed. And then the other one is means of production, thanks to industrial revolution. So new technologies adopted for textile. So Scotland, for instance, is one of the cradles of industrial revolution. Doon nagkaroon ng first major textile companies that ability to produce products en masse, unlike any time before. And then, syempre, may kolonyalismo. So, kuha sila ng kung ano-ano sa India, sa Persia, ganun-ganon. Tapos, ipoprocess nila sa Manchester, whatever, and then they'll export it back to Europe, etc. So, change in relations of production and change in means of production. Alright? May tanong ba kayo dyan? Alright. This is complete out of nowhere. Sorry, galing ako sa traffic. So, pag na-traffican ka, bigla mag-iisip ka ng ganun. Now, but there's another way of also looking at capitalism. The let's say, non-Marxist, non-progressive way. The other way to look at capitalism is that capitalism is a system whereby, so, sinong influential dito? So, kung Karl Marx is the influential guy for a progressive understanding of capitalism, especially yung role ng, yung idea ng labor theory of value, the value of a product depends on the amount of labor that it goes into it. And the capitalist will always get the difference between your actual profit, your actual productivity, and the wage you get. So your wage will be just a small part or a slightly bigger part of the total productivity. So let's say I produce a cell phone. The cell phone is worth $1,000. Probably just give me $400. Tapos yung $600, that's his profit. He'll reinvest that in the means of production. Then he can produce more and more cell phones. Now, in fairness kay Karl Marx, he was actually not super anti-capitalist. Sabi nga ni Karl Marx, ba't yung mga capitalist ay kawawa? Because kung hindi ka efficient na capitalist, let's say, mabait ka, kaysa $400, nagbibigay ka ng $800 dito sa cellphone, so $200 ang profit mo, kakainin ka ng buhay ng ibang capitalist na mas madamot. Yung mga 200 lang binibigay, binubulsa nilang 800. Bakit kamo? Because if they have more profit, they have more capital to invest in their technology, mamaya, they can outcompete you at kakainin ka ng buhay. So in a sense, there are parts in Karl Marx's analysis where he says, parang bati yung mga kapitalista parang kawawa because they're stuck in this Darwinian struggle for higher productivity. Alright? You get what I'm saying? Now let's go to the other side of looking at it. So this here, the very influential person to keep in mind is classroom Adam Smith. Now, obviously Adam Smith, pare siya diba? All the Protestant version. So, he comes from a theological background, brilliant guy. He had a number of books. One of his books, Great with Theory of Moral Sentiments, that's a kind of it's a book about solidarity, social bond, compassion, etc. But most people forget about that. What people know is the other book by Adam Smith, right? Wealth of Nations. And this book is extremely influential in the more conservative, centrist analysis of emergence of capitalism. So the argument of Adam Smith is essentially this. You have parang ganito just to quote Adam Smith, we trade not because I love to trade with you. We trade because there's a coincidence of needs, right? So, bibili ako sa'yo ng ganito. How do you explain it? Okay, let me explain it this way. When China buys product from us, banana, etc., it's not because the Chinese love us, it's because the Chinese want our banana, right? And when we give our banana to them, it's not because we love them, because we want to make the profit. Now, so in a market economy, people interact with each other based on their coincidence of needs, not based of altruism or I love you, etc., right? Now, obviously, in an advanced market economy, hindi ka naman nagbabarter, there's a money. Because sometimes there's no coincidence of needs. Ikaw, may kailangan ka sa akin, pero ngayon wala akong kailangan sa'yo. That's why you create money, because the money is the credit you'll have to buy something maybe from you or for someone else in the future. But the key contribution of Adam Smith was this: enlightened self-interest. His idea was that if everyone is self-interested, but in an enlightened way, at mag-focus siya dun sa productivity niya, at the end of the day, all of us are going to produce something, and thanks to money, we'll be able to exchange them at different points in time, even when we don't have coincidence of needs. And that creates a market. Now, this is where it gets important for Adam Smith. His argument is also this: dapat ang Estado ay hindi nakikialam sa ekonomiya at sa production ng products. Production ng mga kung ano-anong bagay. Because the problem during Adam Smith's time, again, Scottish, so this is the Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume, all of these people. But one of the things that Adam Smith kept on saying is, the problem in his time was, oligarchs, essentially oligarch ang problema nila noon, right? To use our language today, which ironically is an ancient Aristotelian language of oligarchy and all. No, so back in the day, what we had were monopolies. So ikaw ay isang hari, no, or the Queen of England. Then you give monopolies to, to different aristocrats. Sabi niya, ikaw, punta ka dito. Sa'yo ha, ikaw nang bahala sa tobacco expert. Ikaw, punta ka dito. Ikaw ha, bahala ka sa textile experts. Ikaw, punta ka dito. So, what happened there is you create distortions in the economy. Because because production is based on royal prerogative or political, what's the, there's the term for that. Fiduciary. Okay, fiduciary decision of the king, right? So, gusto ng king ibigay sa yung tobacco product, parang cronies, essentially cronies, right? Crony capitalism, right? Crony, right? Cronies ang kumukuha ng production licenses. So you have the government giving license to who produces this and that, and then they have monopolies. That's the old school colonial style. In Spanish is in this, English is in this, Dutch is in this, whatever. There were monopolies granted to people. Now, sometimes the monopolies go to someone who's productive. But a lot of times it goes someone dahil palakasan. Dahil malapit siya sa hari. Dahil, naghaliparot sila or type siya ni queen nung king. Di ba? So para kay Adam Smith, ano to? Hindi pwedeng ganyan. Dapat ang magpo-produce ng textile ay kahit sinong gusto mag-produce ng textile, and then that's where the market comes in. Because what the markets does is this. The consumers, if they have a choice in a free market, they will always go for the most affordable and quality product. So instead, nabigyan mo ng monopoliya based on royal prerogative to a specific person or specific group or specific family or specific, colonial counterpart, bahala kayo. Gusto mong gumawa ng kotse, gawa ng kotse. Gusto mong gawa ng kotse, tignan natin sino mas magandang kotse. Di ba? And then, who will decide that? Not the king, not the queen, not the, not the intellectuals, philosophers. No. The one who will decide this is the consumers, the people. So Adam Smith believed in what you call a kind of a minimalist state or a night watchman. Para sa kanya, ang trabaho ng Estado is hindi makikialam sa ekonomiya. Ang trabaho ng Estado is to provide property laws and to be the night watchman to make sure walang nag-aabuso, nagbabastusan, nag-aagawan ng properties, etc. Again, by the way, guys, I'm simplifying it a lot. Of course, I could have explained it much more complicated way, but I'm really simplifying to you the argument that Adam Smith was making only in one of his book, by the way. If you read Theory of Moral Sentiments, it's a very different book. But dito sa Wealth of Nation, parang galit na galit si Adam Smith dito sa mga royal prerogatives, sa mga crony capitalism. No? So what he wants is a system whereby the markets determine who will become the dominant producer, right? Okay. Now, so that's where laissez-faire idea comes in, right? The invisible hand. The idea is, ang gobyerno will only intervene if may nangyaring violation of the law or talagang nagbabastusan, nagpapatayan yung mga ibang kapitalista. Otherwise, it should be in the background. Invisible hand. Laissez-faire, right? Now, that is a debate in 200, 300 years ago, right? Now, that debate was carried over into modern times, including in the 20th century, right? So, ito, guys, I'm simplifying that, right? Now, obviously, yung Marxist way of looking at things had its own evolution. The Adam Smithian way of looking at things also had its own evolution. The Smithian way became much more amenable to pro-market people. conservative people, capitalist people, while the Marxist point of view became more amenable to working class people and middle class people. And then there'll be improvements of that. So one side wants less state regulation, lower taxes, more freedom for capitalists. No, the American way of looking at it is called libertarian. So Elon Musk is clearly more Adam Smith. He wants minimum taxation, minimum regulation, as much as possible. Leave it to technologists and companies to decide. But on the other hand, you have people who believe in the state intervention, right? They want the state to have more say. Dito nagre-regulate kasi the idea is there's no such thing as free market in the sense that you leave it to the producers and then things will go fine on their own. No, for sure ang mangyayari diyan over time, may isang bully na lalabas diyan and then kakainin niya yung mga mas maliliit at gagawa siya ng monopolies, right? And then in economics, there's also a term for natural monopolies. There's certain sectors whereby there has to be a certain degree of monopolies. Otherwise, bababuyin ng mga maliliit ng producers yan. So again, that's a complicated idea. Let's put that aside. Let's park it for a while. But going back to this, so that debate goes into the 20th century. Should we have more state intervention or less state intervention, right? But it also develops a different kind of debate by the 20th century, especially during the Great Depression. So the Great Depression was almost exactly, 2022 tayo, diba? So you're talking about 1920s going to 1930s. That's where the Great Depression happened. Now, we don't have time to discuss Great Depression. We can discuss that later on. But Great Depression essentially was triggered by stock market crash. At the same time, all of these protectionist practices in Europe, and then papunta na tayo sa Second World War. So crazy times, no? Crazy times. So here there'll be a debate. So there'll be two sides of debate. And so the two figures you have to keep in mind is Friedrich Hayek, right? So Austrian School of Economics. Later on, he'll be a key figure in London School of Economics. And the other one is, I'll be honest, my favorite, John Maynard Keynes. Now, John Maynard Keynes is from Cambridge. His idea is slightly more, let's say, center-left, while Hayek is more center-right. So Hayekian point of view is government intervention generally is bad. Leave it to the market. And his idea was markets are more efficient because they have spontaneous organization. So very similar to what Adam Smith was saying. You know, if you leave it to the market will figure it out on its own. John Maynard Keynes said, I'm not sure about that because at some point in time, especially when there's a crisis, there's market failure. And market failure happens for many reasons, including for psychological reasons. So for instance, when there's a stock market crash, people panic. Suddenly everyone wants to withdraw their money, suddenly everyone wants to sell their stock markets. So if the state doesn't step in, baksak lahat kasi paranoia takes over. In fact, he had a term for psychology of economics. He called it animal spirits. So in good times, suddenly everyone splurges, buys stocks. Essentially what happened 2 years ago, right? Yung kasagsagan ng... And then when the stock is going down, suddenly someone will panic and then everyone wants to sell, and everything will collapse. So the idea is that the state has to have a certain degree of intervention. But there is another layer of debate between Hayek and John Maynard Keynes. The debate also about inflation, how much inflation should an economy tolerate. So for the Keynesian school, higher inflation is okay so long as it creates more economic growth and employment. For the Hayekian school, higher inflation is bad because it hurts people who have savings. So it discourages savings, it punishes people who have savings, and at the same time, higher inflation, right? So higher inflation hurts those people who save. Because mag-save ako, lagay ako ng pera. If inflation is so high, wala nang silbi yung pera mo after a year or so. Dahil sa inflation eats the value of that. Again, this is actually, I should draw a graph so that I can tell you exactly how you can explain that. Now, so this debate has never gone away. So it's called the first, I see it as the first grand debate. I have a book on that, this debate between Hayek and Keynes, but let's not go. But I'll explain to you why mahalaga ito sa mga nangyari nowadays, diba? Now, Keynes will come out the more successful in that initial debate because the way we got out of Great Depression was many things, including World War II, which created massive production, military production, etc. But the other one is the New Deal in the US, where the FDR government introduced significant amount of intervention in the economy, right? They strengthened labor unions, they raised the taxes, they created welfare, they had massive infrastructure projects to create jobs for the people. So kung nagbasa kayo ng novel na yung yung Mockingbird, yan, makikita nyo there are references to the Great Depression there. And the infrastructure jobs that was provided to unemployed people. Anyway, to cut the story short, Keynes comes on top because of how America and some of the other countries were able to successfully get out of the Depression through state intervention. And in fact, for 20 to 30 years, Keynes' ideas shapes global economy, including the introduction of World Bank, International Monetary Fund, yung GATT dati, and now you have, of course, the World Trade Organization. So John Maynard Keynes is someone you have to really know about. He's one of the most influential thinkers of modern era. His ideas shaped history. I'm literally quoting him, right? Ideas can shape the history, right? So John Maynard Keynes was a fabulous guy. Now, so John Maynard Keynes also was a dominant thinker throughout the 20th century and for the next 2 decades or quarter century after World War II. Now, why is this important? Because this brings us to the Phillips Curve, right? So this is the Phillips Curve guy. So the idea in the Phillips Curve is, remember, Keynes is less concerned with inflation, more concerned with employment. And he believes in what we call demand-side economics. If may economic depression, dapat ang Estado ay mag-intervene, tulungan mga consumers, bigyan ng trabaho para bumili sila ng produkto and the economy can recover. While the other side are more focused on what we call supply-side economics. Mas concern nila yung mga mayayaman, yung mga producers, hindi sila maabala masyado sa regulasyon at taxation. Right? Supply-side economics, demand-side economics. Now, because Keynes was dominant, his ideas was policy-wise dominant, and later on, together with this guy, this American guy called, I think, White, yung family name now. So two of them conceptualized essentially the global economic architecture after Second World War. So Keynesian ideas were not only influential in certain circles in Britain and certain circles in America, including among the New Dealers, although they don't exactly overlap. Again, we can debate about that. But anyways, Keynes becomes so influential. And actually, Keynes also correctly predicted Second World War based on his understanding of yung nangyaring Versailles Treaty after First World War. But I don't want to overwhelm you guys, so I'm going to just get over that. Now, so the Phillips Curve is kind of builds on the Keynesian ideas. And by the way, interesting thing with Phillips Curve is that it's not only from this economist named Phillips, but actually Phillips Curve was an interpretation of his primary analysis by other important Keynesian economists, right? Sila Samuelson, among others, right? So kung nag-aaral kayo ng economics, mababasa niyo yung mga books ni Samuelson. Yung mga introductions to economics, puro mga Samuelson yan, right? So actually, the Phillips Curve is not just from the economist named Phillips, but also interpretation from Samuelson and all. Now, the idea is, so ito yung actually Phillips Curve. It's much more complicated if you can see it. It's much more complicated. The simplified idea or interpretation of the Phillips Curve is this one, which is much less complicated. And the idea is very simple. Simple lang yan. Ayoko kasi dun sa iba pinapa-complicate. Hindi naman ganun profound yung idea. The idea is simple. Don't worry about inflation. So this is inflation. So we have X and Y axis, right? X and Y axis. So this is a vertical, right? So this is unemployment. This is inflation. The idea is simple. Don't worry about inflation because usually high inflation goes with high growth. So bababa yung unemployment, right? And according to Keynesian economics, the important thing is that people have low employment because when people have money, they can consume. When they can consume, they create production and so on and so forth. Everything is fine. So for a long time, inflation wasn't a primary concern because economic growth and employment was a concern. So as inflation goes higher, unemployment goes lower. This was an assumption that was holding for quite some time. And then boom, boom, something happens in the 1970s. A combination of many factors. Daming ginastos sa Amerika si Vietnam. And then nagkaroon ng giyera sa Middle East, yung mga Arab countries, they created an oil embargo. So what happened here is suddenly, just as the economies were slowing down, at the same time, there was also an increase in inflation because of the oil shocks and other factors. Again, there are many factors. There was the labor union factors, yung price-wage spiral, there was the Vietnam War fiscal crisis. So let's just park them aside because they're whole book, right? But let me just focus on one thing because mahalaga ito for our discussion today is because one thing that happened then is this. When the Middle East countries, Arab countries, right? Di ba, war yun, yung Kippur war between Israel and then you had Egypt, Syria, etc. So, yung mga Arab countries, nag-oil embargo sila para yung West will not support Israel but support their cause. Now, what happened is that because of the oil embargo, the prices of oil suddenly shot up, right? Crazy. Lahat tayo apektado, including sa Pilipinas. In fact, one reason why we, I think, moved towards Bataan nuclear power plant is because we were badly affected by the oil shocks in the 1970s, right? Panahon ni Marcos to. So, martial law to. So, shortly after martial law, itong oil shock. So, boom! Something happens here, right? Just as growth is slowing down, inflation also goes high because oil is now not easily available. So, there's a panic on supply of oil, right? Law of supply and demand. So, if the supply goes down but the demand is high, the price will shoot up. So at once, there was higher inflation, but not lower unemployment. So unemployment was also high, and inflation was also high because growth was low. So this is what you call stagflation. You have economic stagnation going hand in hand with high inflation. So that's where bumalik the Adam Smith Hayekian people. So by the 1980s onwards, people like Margaret Thatcher in UK, people like President Reagan in the US, they said essentially what Adam Smith and more importantly Hayek and his supporters were saying, which is, ang problema ay gobyerno. The government is the problem. Essentially, that was the motto of Reagan. Margaret Thatcher had their own version. So now we shifted back to supply-side economics. The term for that is neoliberal economics. No? Fast forward, now neoliberal economics is also under pressure because of another major crisis, the 2007-8 Great Recession. Because that showed that if you're too much focused naman on supply side, you also create distortions in the markets, including financialization market, too much money in the Wall Street, casino economics, over-concentration of wealth among few oligarchs and big producers, so on and so forth, right? And increasing inequality in the West. In fact, one reason Trump and Le Pen and all of these people have been winning is because over the past 30 years, the middle class in a lot of these rich countries, their wages, actually real wages, have been going down or stagnating. So there's a lot of frustration. While the rich guys, all of them are getting richer and richer. So back in FDR time, siguro kung CEO ka, wala naman CEO. But I mean, let's say you're a manager, tapos kung janitor ka, let's say the differences in wage ratio was, let's say, 10 to 1 at most. Today, it's 200 to 1, right? So the problem with neoliberal economics is that it brought down inflation, but it didn't really create much of accelerated growth. But even more important, it created a lot of inequality, which were exposed during the Great Recession 2007 and 8. Now, problema is, since 2007 and 8, we have been going back again to this grand debate. Should we have a post-Keynesian? So, Keynesian, neo-Keynesian, post-Keynesian, because the new Hayekian or new Smithian is also now questioned, what you call neoliberalism. But while we have been having all of this debate, boom, nangyari itong pandemya. Have you noticed what happened in the pandemic? During the pandemic, the Keynesian school actually won once again. Why? Because there was massive intervention by the state. Sa Amerika, ilan ang ginastos nila Biden? $2 trillion, di ba? Para to reflate their economy. Dito sa Pilipinas, we also had our stimulus program. So, remember we discussed expansionary fiscal policy, yung mag-uutang ng gobyerno para gumastos, para bumalik ang economy, and then kung may growth, bayaran natin yung utang later on. By this time, lumaki rin ang economy natin. So, as a share of our economy, the problem is kind of solved. Again, I'm simplifying things very much. So, Keynesian economics was actually making a comeback. In fairness, and it worked. So, in the US, they didn't have a very long depression. They didn't even have depression. They had slight recession, I think, and then they recovered. Some other countries like China did not even have recession. Their economy grew. Philippines, at least may kind of recovery na tayo. So suddenly now Keynes was winning. So tingnan niyo, parang back and forth to eh. Diba? And hindi lang Keynes, yung mga leftists, Marxists, like Bernie Sanders, mga ganun, they were also making a rise politically, right? But, etong nangyaring problema. When Russia attacked Ukraine, that created another series of oil shocks. Another major oil shock. And also food shock. Because as I told you, Russia and Ukraine are also put together responsible for more than 10% of entire global calories. A lot of grain in the world comes from those two countries. And then Russia is also the top oil producer outside OPEC, and I think second largest in the world or something like that, no? Or exporter of oil, not producer, exporter of oil, right? So, go on. biglang parang hindi na gumana masyado yung Keynesian economics because what we're facing right now is stagflation again. Kung saan, economic recovery is slowing down, but inflation is going high, right? And this is the problem we're facing today. Again, of course, I can explain this more. And kasi ganito yung guys eh. And as I said, there's another problem we're facing. It's also the shock to the supply chains, sorry. Because maraming cars hindi ma-deliver, maraming PS5 hindi ma-deliver dahil yung China may lockdown, etc. So nagsabay-sabay lahat yun eh. Yung shock sa supply lines dahil maraming lockdowns, disruptions in world economy, and then this oil shock, food shock, nagsabay-sabay yan. So this is heavily pushing up inflation in many sectors, right? At the same time, economic recovery is slowing down in many, many countries, right? So nagsama yung dalawa na yan. Now, thankfully guys, dito sa Southeast Asia, we're a little bit luckier because we got tourism recovery and some of our sectors are actually doing well. So maybe we're not gonna be hurt as bad as some of the other countries. But nonetheless, may effect din sa atin sa Pilipinas yan eventually, no? So again, I mean, I can talk more and more. Okay, andyan pa ba kayo? Baka iniwan nyo na ako, no? But I'm just trying to explain to you guys. Anyway, maybe we can have a separate lecture on this based on this book. This is a fantastic book because it explains to you the origins of the major oil companies. All of these ones that we know, I don't know, Shell and Petron and Chevron and all of that. But there's a new book by Daniel Yergin when he explains the next phase as we deal with climate change, electric car production, etc. But again, I'm sorry if I had to breeze through it and simplify. But what I'm telling you right now, ito ang problema ngayon, guys. So, one reason also, economic growth. So actually, I explained to you why inflation is going high, but I didn't explain to you why the growth is going down. One of the key reasons for that is that because in the US, there's a fear that inflation is so high. I mean, the inflation is decades high. Ang priority sa din ng government ngayon is inflation rather than growth. So, the US Fed Reserves, their central bank, yung Bangko Sentral ng Amerika, yung version nila, ay nagtaas ng kanilang interest rate. So, now I'll explain to you a little bit of monetary policy. So, the idea is this. If you raise interest rates, yung mga may savings sa banks, maganda sa kanila yun. Kasi you'll get more credit for that, right? More interest rates. But, if you raise the interest rates, mas mahal na umutang sa bank para mag-invest sa production. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you're a producer and you want access to finance and the interest rates go high, that's not good for production. And if production or producers cannot access cheap loan, their production will go down. Therefore, economic growth will go down. So at once, inflation is going high because of the shocks to production, Ukraine war, Russia war, and then sanctions on Russia, so oil production, etc. And on the other hand, growth is also going down because the central bank, the Federal Reserve in the US, and then now in the Philippines, etc., are also raising their interest rates para inflation will go down. But the problem is that increasing the interest rate will also hurt production because it's harder for your producers to access affordable or cheaper loans that they can invest in their production. Not to mention, if gusto mong bumili ng bahay or bumili ng kotse, tumataas din ang interest rate. So magdadalawang isip ka na mag-loan para bumili ng product. And if we don't buy as many products as we could have, then sales are also down. So for instance, kung ikaw producer, you're having all of these problems in production. You cannot access cheap products. At the same time, ang taas ng oil and gas, so consumers also don't have much money. Now, tinaas pa yung interest rate sa bank. So kung gusto mo mag-loan, mas mataas ang interest rate, parang ayaw mo na mag-loan. Do you get what I'm saying? So nagsama-sama lahat ng mga bagay na yan. And now that's why we potentially could face a stagflation. God willing, hindi. I'm still slightly optimistic that in Southeast Asia at least, we'll be able to avoid the stagflation, but perhaps our economic recovery is going to really slow down. Inflation is not good. The prices of oil and all is really, really high, among others. But the baseline inflation is not in the double-digit territory, as in Turkey and some of the other countries, which is crazy. Nonetheless, we see signs that both inflation is going high on one hand and growth is going down. So as I said, World Bank slashed their January forecast of 4.1%. Now it's down to 2.9% growth. So significant drop in global growth. That's half of last year, which was 5.6, 5.7%. And then at the same time, we also see a collapse in stock markets because ganito yung stock market, medyo may pagkakazino yan. Now that people are realizing, oh my goodness, there's going to be economic slowdown. People may not buy as many Teslas anymore. By the way, Tesla is having problems also producing because they cannot access a lot of microchips, etc. for their cars. So the stocks prices are also collapsing at the same time. So many people who are making money in stocks and investing in houses, in consumption, etc. Pati sila ang problema ngayon. So you can see it's a spiral effect there. So kaya nga Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos alone, two of them lost $124 billion just in the last few months. 50 richest people lost $500 billion in recent months. According to Adam Tooze, who's my favorite economic historian, please check him out. Very smart guy, Adam Tooze. Adam, that was Tooze, T-O-O-Z-E. He teaches at Columbia University, formerly based in UK and Germany. Very brilliant guy. He explains things very simply. Para sa kanya, this global economic outlook we're looking at is, quote, the sharpest deceleration in a post-recession recovery in 80 years. In 80 years. This is the worst slowdown after recovery, referring to our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Yung economic shock na nangyari. Pilipinas 2020, almost 10% contraction na nangyari sa atin, no? So all of these are gonna have spiral effects, right? Yung Bangko Sentral nagtaas din ng interest rates because they're also worried that inflation also is picking up in the Philippines. Maybe consumer spending will make the situation worse if it keeps on going up. At the same time, they also have to respond because if US, ganito kasi, if US gives better interest rate, meaning more interest for your saving, then ba't ako pupunta sa Pilipinas? Lagay ko na lang yung pera ko sa Fed Reserve, mas malaki ang kikitain, or either I'll buy treasury bill or put money in the US because I'll get more yield for my investment. So kung ikaw na sa Pilipinas, para hindi magkaroon ng outflow of investors, you also have to give them higher interest rate. So my point is, you're not gonna come out of this lecture experts, but you're gonna, this vlog, whatever you want to call it. But you're gonna come out of this vlog realizing how complicated and difficult this situation is. Kaya nga hindi pwede na bara-bara yung presidente, bara-bara yung politika, kung sino-sino lang nilalagay dyan sa gobyerno. Dahil kung ikaw ay leader, dapat nagigets mo itong lahat ng in-explain ko dito. Para alam mo paano i-navigate ito. Gets nyo ba? Again, as I told you, I simplified this by, I don't know, it was like simplified cube, right? Sobrang I had to make it really bare bones. But do you understand what's happening here? All of this dilemma. So back in the day, it was simple. Higher inflation, it's okay because we'll have more growth. Now, you can have both higher inflation and lower growth going hand in hand. And if you increase your interest rates to deal with inflation, you might further hurt growth, so that will hurt consumer spending. And then you get what I'm saying? They say there's no free lunch in economics. And sometimes, it's not only there's no free lunch, baka bati free oxygen wala. You get what I'm saying? So, ang laking problema ito. At yung problema din kasi natin ngayon, guys, is you and I may be able to afford some of the basic goods now, but marami sa ating mga kababayan na close to the poverty line, a single peso change in the prices of goods could be a matter of going hungry a day or having food a day, or half a food a day. Do you get what I'm saying? Kaya nga ngayon, medyo nakakabala tong inflation, like we can still survive, thank God, but marami sa ating kababayan who are very close to the poverty line, delikado talaga yung situation. Kasi, kaya nga, naintindihan ko itong ginagawa ni Marcos na sinasabi ako na mag-DAR, Department of Agriculture, ibababa ko yung presyo ng bigas. Now, I don't know if he can pull it off or he can pull it off legitly, but the point is, he understands this inflation na tayo nagre-reklamo, nagmimim-mim, this could be a matter of going hungry or matter of barely surviving a day dun sa marami nating kababayan. And we are already seeing massive protests in some Middle Eastern countries dahil yung presyo ng mga bread at mga bagong bilhin ay biglang tumaas. So, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people could go hungry, and that could create a lot of political crisis if this inflation situation is not solved. But if in solving inflation, we're going to also hurt growth because we have to raise interest rates, then that's also going to hurt a lot of people in another way. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, it's a really complicated situation. Kaya nga, let's hope talaga matapos itong giyera sa Ukraine. Not only because we want to end the war, because we also want to end the disruptions. At the same time, let's hope also China gets things right dito sa COVID-19 management nila. Kasi grabe yung mga lockdown sila. Para medyo maayos din natin itong mga disruptions sa supply chains. Ito nga meron kami dito elevator. Hanggang ngayon, wala pa yung mga parts ng isang elevator kasi galing pa daw abroad pero wala pa yung spare parts. Bakit wala daw? Dahil may disruptions sa supply chain. So I could see it in my own environment whereby even spare parts for elevators are hard to get right now. So, nagkumpul-kumpul lahat to Kaya kailangan talaga ng mahusay na gobyerno which can have targeted assistance to people who are going to be worse affected. At the same time, calibrated adjustments in the interest rates para you don't hurt growth that much. So, at once, you don't want to hurt growth that much by not raising interest rate too much. At the same time, you don't want to also hurt growth that much, of course, because we need economic recovery. And then, also, you have to provide targeted assistance to sectors of society, potentially millions of families, who are already hurting so much from the rise in inflation. And unfortunately, a lot of them also lost their jobs or are underemployed because of the economic dislocation that happened back in 2020, nung kasagsagan ng pandemic. In short, guys, komplikadong policy dilemma issue na yan. So if anyone tells you, ay, madali lang yan, ito lang gawin ko, or kayang-kaya namin yan, or wag kayong magalala, kaming bahala, wag kayong maniwala. Hindi po totoo yan. Alright? There are no simple solutions. There are gonna be trade-offs. There are gonna be difficult choices to make, and there are gonna be millions of people who will need assistance from the government, including yung mga namamasahe. Who knows, baka yung mga Grab, kailangan na din nila kasi biglang doble na impression ng yung primary, di ba, yung input mo, which is gasoline or diesel. Pati diesel, kasing mahal na ng gasoline ngayon. I mean, grabe, di ba? So, this is a huge shock. And if people have less money to spend because they have to spend more on oil and gas, then that also doesn't help producers who already have to deal with higher interest rates if they want to get loan. At the same time, lower consumption because people have lower money. You get it? So it's the whole circulation is affected here. It's a whole circulation process. Think of capitalism like an organism. When you have all of these circulations and disruptions in this area can affect this area, right? So exactly, domino effect, right? So it's not even a domino because domino is just like that. This is like multiple intersecting. You know what I'm saying? Ayan na, nagsasadi na tayo. Multiple intersecting effects, no? Secondary effects. Cascade. More like cascading effect. Parang gumaganon ganon. Kaysa yung ganon lang. Na parang domino lang na ganon. So that's why mahirap talaga to, and that's why we need policy interventions. And you need people who understand basic economics. Not necessarily kailangan banker who understand basic economics to be in charge. And sana naman people do more to explain to people ano nangyari. Because unfortunately, when we have crises like that, people are in the blame game. Kasalanan ni ganitong presidente. Marami dyan din kasalanan nangyari abroad. Hindi naman natin kasalanan na nag-akyat ng interest rate ng Fed Reserves. Hindi naman natin kasalanan na nag-giyera yung dalawa na yan, di ba? So, but the government also has to be effective in responding. Yes, hindi natin kasalanan yung nangyari abroad, pero kung palpak yung response natin, di kasalanan din natin yan because we didn't mitigate it. So, you need policy mitigation and policy adaptation. Daldal ko na, dami natin pinag-usapan. Now, I want to discuss another thing today, but I'll leave it to, because complicated issue yan. Gusto ko rin pag-usapan itong issue ng deregulation, oil deregulation, no? Yung Republic Act number 8479, 1998, an act deregulating the downstream oil industry and for other purposes. Because, I discussed many things, but some people are saying, there's another side to this story. I think, was it Teddy Locsin or someone said na kasalan din ng mga nagpa-profiteering sa oil industry and all of that. Now, we'll discuss that. I'm not saying anyone is doing it yet, but let's discuss that because one concern people have is that, yes, there's oil shocks. Yes, they're going, but it looks like some companies are raising the prices much faster than the rise in the prices in actually world markets. And then some people are saying, well, di ba yung oil natin di man galing Russia, galing Middle East, bakit nakiki-eksena tayo? Bakit anong effect niya sa akin? Europe, kasi reliant sila sa Russia, hindi naman tayo, di ba? So there are those arguments. Kaya nga there are proposals to change the oil deregulation law. Ito yung bill. There's a new bill being passed to amend Republic Act 8479 to prevent oil companies from raising prices of old stock and require oil players to increase their minimum inventory. So kung excuse mo, umakyat ang presyo ng Brent crude, so akyat din natin. Bakit mo yakit? Bumili ka kahapon pa or bumili ka last year pa Siyempre, yung binili mo, mura pa Bakit mo bebenta ng presyo na ngayon? Yung product mo, binili mo at the price of last year. You know what I'm saying? So you have to have certain revisions to also avoid price manipulation. At the same time, we also have to have access to the accounting procedure, kung may yung algorithm na ginagamit nila to calculate the prices. So do you get how complicated this issue is, no? Okay. That's why kailangan mo ng malakas na estado. Kasi maraming abusado talaga kung hindi natin ayusin. And yes, sabihin natin may mga companies na pwede mag-benefit, but the whole economy is gonna go down. Then kawawang taong bayan, and down the road, mali din yan kasi these companies will also get hurt. If people have no money, then who's gonna buy your oil, diba? So, yan ang problema sa short-term thinking at mga abusado. They hurt everyone in the end. First the poorest, then the middle class, and then themselves, right? So, maybe next time, discuss natin itong oil deregulation law. Kasi explain ko sa inyo guys, yung deregulation and privatization na nangyari panahon ni Ramos. At to say, kasalanan ni Ramos yan, you're missing the point. Because Ramos had to privatize because puro mga bankrupt yung mga companies natin thanks sa mga corruption na nangyari under you-know-who, right? Thanks to the cronies of you-know-who. But before we go there, because that's a whole minefield of discussion in itself, and discussing this Republic Act 8479 and the new proposals to amend it and how can we fix it, I felt enough. I gave you guys more than enough of your share. Discussing interest rate, so that's monetary policy. I also discussed fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy, discussing the case of New Deal, infrastructure investments. And then we also discussed stagflation, how this was not anticipated by the traditional interpretation of Phillips Curve, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment, but the neoliberal system that replaced it in the 80s until 2007-8 was not necessarily also good. So now we are moving towards Keynesian economics, but once again, we're facing the problem of stagflation. So now we're pushing back again in the direction of libertarian solutions, like bring down the taxes, remove VAT, federal tax, regulation, etc. So let's see. And some people are worried that if Biden reduces taxes on oil and gasoline to deal with inflation, that could encourage increase in carbon footprint, so that will hurt his climate policy. Do you get how complicated? That's how complicated policy making is, guys. There are multiple intersecting trade-offs. That's why hindi talaga pwede bara-barang presidente mo. Hindi talaga pwede bara-bara or yung tipong, ay, dalhin na lang natin yan sa political will. Kasi kung wala ka namang alam, paano mo na may political will yan? Okay naman may political will, pero dapat may alam ka sa buhay, may konting appreciation ka ng complexity of this world. Kasi nasa globalized world na tayo, guys. Okay, sobrang daldal ko na, napagod ako. Pagod ako sa inyo stressful talaga kayo, dami ng tanong. Dami ng kuda. Basta grabe talagang, kalain mo, makikipicture, wow, feel na feel sikat, na picture tayo, ganun. Picture, ano pangalan mo? Nice. Ano pangalan mo? Nice. Ganun, paparazzi, tapos paalis ka na. Sir, ano palang pangalan mo? Ayan tayo Bakit ka nakipicture? Hindi mo pala okay na, just kidding. Baka kilala yung mukha, pero hindi yung pangalan. Ayan tayo Zading-zadi, pero hindi alam yung pangalan. Yan. Kaya sabi ko, dapat dun sa balota, may avatar. Kaya di mo alam pangalan. Ay, ito yung vlogger, yan. Botohin natin, zading-zadi yan, yung mga ganon. Tapos yung nickname mo, Fuego. Tumatapong ang Fuego Haydar, yan, mga ganon. Ang ganda yan. Fuego Haydar. Ay, alam ko yan, vlogger yan, magaling yan. Botohin ko yan, dapat ganon yung balota mo. Yan, ayan tayo. Ano na? Andyan pa ba kayo? Wala na. Umuwi na yung iba. Inflation, monetary policy. Daming alam. Yan, palaing. Yan, palaing. Nagadong tibagbagam. May term ang lola ko dyan Yung parang kuda. May term sa Ilocano yan What's term? Adula amin. Ayan, adula amin. Daming sinabi, daming alam, daming kuda yan. Adula amin. Yan, natuto kayo sa lola ko. Pag dami mo explain siya, adula amin. Basta, ayan, adula amin. Basta, bahala kayo sa buhay nyo. Ayan, thank you so much sa mga nagbigay. So, thanks to our mates in Australia, New Zealand, bias talaga ako. Alam mo bakit? Kasi sila matutulog na dapat sila, 10 p.m. na sa kanila. Nangiginig pa sila. Kaya thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you din sa mga ka-QC natin, ka-Makati natin, ka-San Juan natin, mga ano natin dyan, mga ka-Marikina, ka-Luzon, ka-Visayas, Palawan, Mindanao. Thank you very much, guys. Ayan, na-nosebleed daw, sabi ni JC. Ayan, kahit na-nosebleed, basta mag-star kayo. Magbigay ka ng star habang nag-nosebleed. Sige. Ayan tayo eh. Yan, makipicture pero hindi niyo alam sino picture niyo. Ayan tayo eh. Grabe talaga. Sumama ako dito sa politiko. Ba't sa akin pupunta yung tao? Hindi ako tumatakbo siya. Tumatakbo. Hindi, ikaw dapat tumakbo. Bakit ako? Di ba? Fresh na fresh pa ako nun eh. Di ba? Wala naman akong alam masyado sa buhay. Yun lang. Alam ko lang mga textbooks. Ganun. At least ngayon marami akong alam sa buhay. Marami akong hugot sa buhay. Ayan. Thank you dyan kay Oscar Dican. Uy, di ba yun yung vlogger? Yan. Di man lang alam yung pangalan. Uy, yun yung vlogger, di ba? Oscar Dicen pala. Dicen? Okay, so I hope I pronounce it properly. Thank you very much kay Josephine Suarez. Yan, galante yan. Yan, meron na siyang notes, so monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade-off. Yan. Ayan, hindi ko pa na-discuss sa inyo. Deflation. Ako po, isa pa yan. Japan had deflation. At yung tinatawag na economic sclerosis. Now, that's another issue I'll have to discuss to you, Japan. The situation in Japan after 1980s when they had their own economic crisis. Yan, iba na naman yan. Deflation ang problema nila for a long time. Pababa yung presyo ng mga bilihin. So, ang pangit dyan, kung pababa yung presyo ng bilihin, bakit ka mag-produce? Di ba? You get what I'm saying? And people will rush to spend. People will not spend because they will wait for the prices to go lower. So deflation could also be bad now. So the best thing is you have managed inflation and sustained increase in wages of people, real wages, meaning inflation-adjusted wages. Thank you kay Margaret Rodriguez for your support. I appreciate that. Thank you kay Nirmia Ijao. Thank you kay Jessica Macanyas. Thank you kay Naomi Tablate. Is that correct? Tablate. Thank you kay Maria Esmeralda. Yan. Is mga regulars natin dyan. Mga regulars sa coffee shop. Gawa ko ng Haydarian Academy. Tapos Kape, Meta. Yung mga ganun. Gawa tayo ng mga chain natin. May mga ano kayo. May app kayo. Mga H-app. Tapos dun sa H-app, pwede kayo bumili ng mga t-shirt natin. Mga product. Talaga operator eh. Nag-iisip na ng mga, tapos per selfie, 20 pesos, pwede kayo mag-download. Tapos di ba meron yung gano'n, yung babayaran mo, kunyari mga feeling celebrity. Parang babayaran ka ng, sabi natin lang, 1,000 pesos, i-greet mo sila. Business daw yun eh. Alam mo saan ko nalaman yun? Yung sa UFC, di ba yung announcer guys? Yung guy nag-announce sa UFC, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall from Nevada. Ganyan nga. Yung guy na yan, di ba? Binabayaran siya na mag-announce ang pangalan ng mga fans. Tapos $100. Walang yan. Laki ng kita nila. Ganyan-ganyan lang. Shoutout lang kumita ng $100 yan. Mary Andales. Pa-picture daw. Ayan. But at least si Mary hindi tayo. Ano sir, anong pangalan mo after kayo nag-picture? Yan. Si Jella. Supportive yan. Sorry, Jella. Nag-message kaya ito sa akin. Hindi ko sinagutan. Balikan ko na lang, ha? Traffic eh. Che, Rosal, thank you. Ay, hindi. Nagbigay ka nga. Thank you. Ano sinasabi na itong isa? Ayan, si Nixon na naman. Ito si Nixon Cruz. Ano yan eh? Mr. Political Will yan. Favorite niya si tatay eh. NBA draft daw. Ako sa basketball. Football ang gusto ko eh. Basketball, hindi naman ako nakaka-relate. At tatangkad nila. Hindi naman tayo ganyan. Mitch Tengchot. Salamat dyan sa supportan natin dyan. Ano? Nagpapakute lang. Hindi tayo. Sir, ano palang pangalan nyo? Bakit man naman sasabihin yan? Pagkatapos ka mag-picture, di ba? Walang hiya. Richard, pwede na yan. Ayan. Ayan. Sabi ni, JCD Sarenses. Thank you sa mga comments mo. Ayan. Sabi niya, bahala na si Bato. Bahala na si Robin sa ating ekonomiya. Ayan. Magandang debate yan sa Senado. Thank you naman dyan sa mga supporters natin. Kay Emil David. Kay Jocelyn Lomberio. Ayan, si Lomberio. Mabait din yan. Friends natin dyan, Cory Inez. Friends natin dyan, Mirth. Ayan na, matanda na si Daddy. Mag-eyeglasses na ako. Thank you dyan kay Mirth. Nepu Moseno. Thank you kay Che Rosal. Ayan, makulit niyan si Che Rosal. Naka 10 comments per meta yan. Thank you kay Vida May Soriano. Sign of star. Thank you. Okay na yan, yung logo. I appreciate that. Thank you. Ayan. Thank you rin. Ito si Mitch Tengcho. Mabait din yan. Sa 30, Malaya. Yan. Thank you dyan. Sa mga friends natin dyan sa mga Japan. Ohayo gozaimasu. 1 hour ahead. Sa mga friends natin dyan sa Seoul, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong. Ni hao ma. Xie for joining us. Yan. Meron tayong friends dyan. Kay Lian, Largo. Yan. You know. Kay Emil David. Ayan, si Emil yung nagda-domino. Sabi ko parang worse than domino. Spiral effect na yan eh. Oo. Yan. Si Oscar. Yan. Si Oscar na thank you ko na yan. Okay. May tanong kayo dyan. Yan. Si Natasha Tamin. Thank you po. Kasalanan daw, egocentric war daw yung nangyari. Hindi nga lang egocentric, profit-centric. Or sino bang reference natin dyan? Thank you kay Katrina Frias. Kay Niermi Ijao. Ayan. Thank you ko na. Yan. Mamaya natin pag-usapan yung Coco Levy Fund. Kasi, alam mo, ibang country, discuss ko rin sa inyo yung Sovereign Wealth Fund. Yung parang rainy days savings ng mga government. Pwede rin natin pag-usapan yan. Huwag kayo naman expect na isang meta lang, expert na kayo. Siyempre, nothing comes easy. It took me years, guys. Years and lots of books to get where I am today. So, huwag tayo mag-shortcut, ha? Magtatalano style na naman kayo. Shortcut. Ayan, thank you daw. Si Jocelyn, thank you daw. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Another day of learning about economics. Maraming salamat din sa inyo. Again, just to be clear, I really simplified this. Of course, it's much more complex, but I really simplified it. How high will it get? Sabi ni Jella. Dapat hindi na umakyat masyado eh. Dapat pababa na soon eh. Medyo kaya nga dapat pag-usapan natin oil deregulation eh. Kasi yung price determination minsan. Tapos yung rollback, kunyari, 50 cent. Tapos 2 peso akyat na naman the next week. Anong klaseng rollback yan, di ba? Ayan tayo eh. Mabubudol-budol na naman tayo na to. Okay. Kaya kailangan ng proper investigation talaga dito. At saka yung oil deregulation law, talagang kailangan ng amendments yan. At proper scrutiny also on the behalf of the Department of Energy and relevant sectors. Thank you also kay Nelda Relamida, right? Thank you for your support. Thank you also kay Yvette Williams, among others. Ang bait niyo naman. Thank you kay Maria Esmeralda again, kay Eunice Babalcon. Yan. Tingnan mo yan yung mga tanong niyo dyan sa baba. Ano yan? Asan na yung Duterte legacy? Ayaw nga, no? Exactly. Hindi ko na diniscuss kasi mabait ako today. Sir, saan yung Duterte legacy discussion? Sagot ko, exactly. Ayan, exactly. Yan. Alam niyo na yung sabi nung sinabi ko. Exactly. Ayan na naman tayo. Thank you kay Alan. At Abude, Naomi Tablate. Ayan, Tablate. Is that correct? Ayan. Basta hindahin ko na lang yung 20 pesos na Ayan tayo. In fairness naman, I think si Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, among others, has proposed some parang 3,000 something or at least assistance dun sa mga ating mga kaibigan sa transport industry na nahihirapan talaga ngayon. Imagine mo after pandemic, tapos ngayon ito naman oil shocks naman and inflation. Kawawa naman talagang kababayan natin, guys. Kaya yan, maglakad na lang tayo, magbike na lang tayo. Ayan. Wag na lang daw yung Duterte legacy. Kasi pag pumunta naman kay Tatay Digong, mag-away-away lang kayo sa comment section. Tignan mo ngayon, wala akong troll halos. 0. Dahil may sense yung usapan natin. Aminin nyo, pag may sense yung usapan natin, biglang wala na yung mga troll. Pansin nyo, wala na. Nag-awit na isuna. Awanin, wala tayong ma-farm dito. Kaya umuyan yung mga trolls. Ganun naman eh. Pero pag Duterte legacy, biglang mataas ang engagement. Pero never mind. Mamaya na lang, sige. Pilitin natin yung legacy ni Tatay. Ayan. Trillion. Ang legacy ni Tatay. Ayan na. You see? Sasabihin ko lang yan. Pero maganda panghakot, no? Ay, pa-antay dyan. Basta hook. Let's talk about the turtle legacy. The highest, fill in the blank. Siyempre, kung pro ka, the highest, blah, blah, blah. Kung anti ka, the highest, ganun. Yan tayo eh. Okay. Basta highest kuda. Ang aking, para sa akin, the most kuda president. Daming kuda. Daming speech, midnight pa. Hindi mo alam saan pupunta yung conversation. At least parang ganun si Bongbong, di ba? Kasi kay Bongbong naman medyo, di ba? Andiyan naman si press secretary, and yung mga vloggers. It's properly organized. VIP, UVIP. Ano ba yung pangalan ng vloggers na ngayon? Oh, by the way, guys, bukas abangan nyo, ha? Bukas abangan nyo. Pag-usapan namin ni Mark Gamboa, yung podcast natin. Mag-live na naman tayong podcast. So you're gonna see the disembodied version of Mark Gamboa. Just his voice talking to me. And then you'll see the actual video later on, okay? Hanapin niya na Project Pilipinas, okay? Pag-usapan namin, ayan, Vloggers Union, Tatay Legacy, BBMs, ayan. Marami tayong pag-usapan, alright? For today, medyo seryoso tayo. You see, this lecture, not lecture, I get pretentious naman tayo. These discussions tell you saan ako galing sa buhay. Para gets nyo naman, pag may sinasabi ako, hindi yan dahil feel ko lang. Or, patrip lang ako kayo. Hindi. Malalim ang pinanggalingan ng mga sinasabi ko sa buhay. Kasing lalim ng mga readings na to, di ba? Tingnan mo naman, may mga highlights pa ako dito. Can you see the highlights and all of these highlights I had? Like, I have all of these notes. I read them, I highlight them, guys. Andyan yung highlights. Matagal na kasi, kaya medyo nawawala yung highlights. They're all notes, guys. So, galing yan dito, guys. Lahat naman pinag-usapan natin. Hindi bara-bara na nag-Wikipedia lang, biglang feeling expert na or nakipag-ano kay Mokausun blog and expert na bigla sana. Yan tayo eh. Or nag-YouTube University, TikTok, college, YouTube University, TikTok college. Yan! VIP Bloggers Union. Yan! Puya ka siya. Yan. Aran tayo eh. Yan. Thank you so much to everyone ha. Ayan na. Sorry, wala si Picasso. Pagod daw siya. Kulang daw ang binigay nyo. Sabi ni Picasso, kompleto na, padalin mo na sa akin yung shirt ko ha. Wait lang, kulang ka pa ng 2,000 stars. Mahal na ngayon ang bilihin. Ayan, galit na tuloy si Picasso. Di na ako papansinin. Kaya kain ko lang energy drink. Ubus laway. Thank you guys. Ayaw nga pala, interview kay Ma'am Carlos. Hindi kayo lumabas. By the way, birthday ni Ma'am Carlos today. Happy birthday, Professor Carlos. We have had our shares of engagements and disagreements throughout the years, but best wishes for our incoming National Security Advisor. Actually, nag-greet ko siya kanina, just to be fair. But shout out din dyan kay Ma'am Professor Carlos, our incoming National Security Advisor. It's her birthday today. Alright? And as I said, we can disagree, but let's be nice and respectful. Alright? Now, kung bardagulan yung kabila, wag natin gayahin. We're higher level. We're higher level. Okay? Medyo social tayo. Huwag tayo makipag-ano sa kanila. Alright? Pero once in a while, syempre, makikipag-alaskador din ako. Pero kawawa naman sila. Kung nag-alaska sila, wala, anong sagot nila? Mumurahin ka lang, babastos. Hindi, wala eh. Mahina. Hindi sila naman mag-trash talk. Ano may mga... ayaw ko na. Hindi na politically correct pala yung mga ganun. Okay na. PC tayo. Alam mo yung mga trash talk, gano'n, yung mga nagte-trash talk yung dalawa. Yo, this gano'n. Yan. May sasabihin sana ako, pero hindi na siya PC eh. Kaya wag na lang. Pero guys, do you appreciate what we're doing here, no? So, syempre, minsan pag-usapan natin Duterte Youth, Tatay, BBM, Talano, mga gano'n. Pero try din natin naman. Medyo matinong discussion naman. Oo. Meron ako dito, biography ni John Maynard Keynes. Tapos ibang... Tsaka isang favorite ko, guys, itong book So if you want a discussion of economic inequality, this is the book to read by Thomas Piketty. Fantastic guy, brilliant guy. So this book is crazy because it will show you trend lines in income inequality distribution, right? So concentration of wealth. It shows you over the past 100 years. May bagong book si Piketty ngayon. Binili ko yung binili ko yung Kindle niya. Walang hard. Ito. So you can see all these graphs shows trend lines in inequality. This is a fantastic book. And it's fascinating because Piketty, a Harvard graduate, he's French. So he's bon vivant. So he uses, references to Balzac and literature, quotes from novels, and then he goes into this hard data. I really like his style. And it's, I think, the only ever book written by an academic that went #1 on Amazon. Like, literally #1 on Amazon 6-7 years ago. So this is a fantastic book, guys. Very good, very good. We'll discuss that more down the road. I want to see more data points by Piketty, including on the developing countries. Meron siyang colleague who also does that. So we'll discuss that. Yeah, so medyo economics na tayo, guys. Graph and trend lines. But don't worry, I'll post. Yan. Kung may time din tayo, pag-usapan din natin si Steven Pinker because if you read naman Pinker, he's much more sorry, ayan, napagod na ako. Optimistic guy. So for instance, he discusses the decrease in violence rate over the years. So if you read him, you'll come out and say, in fairness naman, we're less crazy. Right? We're less crazy in terms of violence rate. So marami rin siyang data points na I really like that what he does. This one. So you can see. And then meron pa siyang logarithmic analysis. So there's a mathematical way of also looking at this. Anyway, that's my point. Pag nagkuda ako online, hindi siya dahil feel ko lang. Dahil po ay nagbasa tayo ng 1,000 libro at least, 'di ba? Over the past few years. Kaya naman, sana naman, 'di ba? I wouldn't have been able to write at least 5 books, in the past years and so if I didn't read 1,000 books at least. Hindi pa kasama diyan yung mga kung ano-anong binabasa natin na online and hindi rin kasama diyan yung mga. Kaya yung mga nagtataka, yan, hindi pa tayo kasal, bakit wala akong friendships masyado, walang barkada. Saan naman nakukuha ng oras, di ba? Kailangan ko basahin lahat to, guys. Kailangan ko basahin lahat to. Someone has to do deep thinking, guys. And proud ako na hindi naman tayo galing sa first world country, hindi naman ako white or whatever, although fuego. Nakipagsabayan din ako dun sa mga experts from around the world. Parang, okay, may alam din ako. Sige, let's go, right? Hindi yung alam mo lang, yung bansa mo lang. I can talk about any country in the world, especially some of the regions in the world I'm very familiar with. Right? Yep. Alright. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat, guys. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, you could see immediately I will bring out the data and to show. Everything we do here is data-based, guys. Data-based. Evidence-based. Peer-reviewed. Hindi yung galing sa ek. Tapos alam ko may mga vloggers na pretentious na kunyari labas ng isang journal article, mga ganyan style. Tapos purong marites na. Okay? Kahit yung marites natin, guys, ay base sa nobela na matino or sa data points na matino. All of these are graphs and data na of that. Alright? Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for supporting us. Oo nga, kung may time mga ako, pwede ako parang book talk? Ay, parang TikTok na book. Di ba meron yung gano'n? Yung parang explain niya yung book, tapos upload na. Meron daw gano'n. Maraming kumikita ng malaki dyan. Pero mamaya na, wala na ako. Ang busy ko, guys, eh. Kailangan ko pa i-set up yung meta podcast. Upload ko audio version natin dito. Wala, mag-isa ko lang eh. Ang hirap naman yung process lahat. Dami kong trabaho. Tapos, I'll probably be teaching in 3 different universities, God willing soon. So, kailangan ko talagang guys. Pasensya na lang, minsan nakakapos kayo or ganun. Hindi ko sinasadya yan. Talagang, wala talagang, tao lang po. Tao lang po. Jejeje. Alam mo yung mga jejemon? Tao lang po. Jejejeje. Yan, ganun. Ayan. Picture. Pangalan mo. Sir, ano palang pangalan mo, sir? Ayan tayo eh. Feel na sikat, yung pala. Sir, ano palang pangalan mo? Ayan tayo. Ay, nako. Ayan. Kayo, pag makipag-picture kayo sa akin, Sir, di ba ikaw yung Meta? Ay, wala nga. May pangalan po ako, hindi ako Meta. Okay? Meta yung company ni Mark Zuckerberg. Hindi ako yan, alright? Hindi ako Meta. Hindi ako vlogger. May pangalan po tayo. Mayroon tayong identidad, okay? Mayroon tayong dignidad sa buhay, hindi lang vlogger. Okay? Ayan, bardagulan. Basta dyan. Siguro, let's see if we have time, we'll do book reviews too, no? So I'll talk about Anna Karenina, right? Kukunin ko yung Anna Karenina and then we'll discuss Anna Karenina, the characters, and tapos mamaya 3 lang nagko-comment dito na yung mga bookworms. Yan. Alam mo, the first book I read it straight 2 days. As in, I was just like 8-year-old. I just read the book. It was just so fascinating. It was like a mythology book, history mythology. I finished the entire book in like 1 run. I mean, just like that. Like, wala nang tulugan, di ba? Tapos ko na yan over 2 days. The whole book, I was just 9-year-old. And then, too cool for school, feeling matalino. Di na ako nagbabasa masyado ng book outside textbook. Of course, yung school. Pero nung mga 18, 19, bumalik na naman ako sa book reading. Ayan na. Wala na. Never the same. Nag-evolve na tayo. Tuloy, nagme-meta na tayo. Ang daldal ko, no? Sige, magtrabaho na ako. Dami ko pang gagawin. Daming kuda. O ano, wala na kayong kuda dyan? Next time, try natin isama si Picasso. Ayun ni Picasso dito eh. Doon na tayo sa ibang Maghanap tayo ng ibang lugar. Salamat guys. Thank you very much. I hope hindi kayo masyado na stress or na marites dito sa ating data-driven economic analysis, right? Economic analysis. I really appreciate our discussions. I was 9. Or 10, whatever, something like that. Kasi 6-year-old, 7-year-old pa, nagbe-BBC na ako, BBC Radio. Nakikinig. So by 10, medyo meron na tayong bent for things. Alright? Siya na! Ikaw na! Ano yung mga sagot? Siya na! Ikaw na. Mas natuto, ganito na lang guys, mas nauna ko nalaman, let's say, yung mga giyera sa mundo kaysa Mickey Mouse and, I don't know, Daffy Duck, mga ganyan. Mauna pa yan. Mas alam ko pa yung pangalan ng Prime Minister ng ganitong bansa kaysa yung kaibigan ni Garfield. Sino yung aso dun sa ni Garfield yun? Ganon, ganern ang buhay natin guys, ganern. Ayan, kasalanan ng tatay ko yan kasi siyang nagturo sa akin ng mga ganyan eh. Tuloy, hindi ako naging doktor katulad niya. Ay, katulad ng gusto niya kasi gusto niya mga medical course and all. Anyway, yan. Ano sabi niya? Gwapo ka naman, sir. Ano yan? Parang compensation? Sorry. Sorry, daddy. Ako nag-medical, field. Okay. Thank you, guys. Grabe, nerd. Mukha bang nerd yan, guys? Sinong nerd na nagaganon, okay? Sinong nerd na nagaganon, okay? You'll not find a nerd like that, okay? Walang ganyang fuego. Guys, this is a new category. Alright? Fuego. Alright? Okay. Salamat. Ayan. Sana naman matapos ng trabaho, wag may time pa tayo mag-FIFA. No, alright. Okay. Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.